Alright. Hey YouTube, I'm Lucky, and in today's video, I'm going to be ranking all of the exotics in Destiny 2 for PvE. Obviously, with Witch Queen, we've had a ton of changes to the sandbox. We've had things buffed, things nerfed, and exotics, change with time. I'll give you a good example with Arbalest getting a huge buff and having the ability to take down anti-barrier champions. We noticed that Ariana's Vow is not nearly as strong as it was before. So Ariana's Vow goes from being an S tier exotic in terms of taking out barriers to, well, we'll rank it later on in this video. So we're going to go through the entire exotic list and rank all of them. The Sweet Business Exotic Auto Rifle. So first up, using your exotic on your primary weapon. Not always the worst option. Obviously, Osteo is a really good exotic primary weapon, but exotics like Izanagi's Burden or exotics like Galahorn, it's pretty hard to decide to choose your primary ammo weapon to be, shooting your exotic primary or it's hard to have your exotic slot be used to shoot primary ammo, and Sweet Business will have that issue there. It does have Overload this season, but I'm going to put Sweet Business in the B ranking for this video. I just don't think it's going to hold up nearly as strong as A or S. It could definitely be lower, but I'm going to put it in B because I tried it out today. I played with it a bunch, and I found it to be, it was fun. It was all right at doing what it needed to do. The Sturm is a very painful weapon to use. You have to use it with Drang in order to get your damage buff perk, and using the hand cannon and a sidearm is just not very conducive to really anything in PvE. So the Sturm is going to get the D tier treatment. We're going to put the Sturm all the way down there in D. The Vigiwing, I did actually take this for a spin today and use this in the raid. It does have Unstoppable Pulse, which isn't too bad, but its exotic perk is not the best. You don't want to be the last living memory fire team. You don't want people dying for that reason. And even when you do get that perk proc, it's not that crazy. So Vigiwing also gets the D tier treatment in PvE, unfortunately. Next up, we'll talk about the Rat King. The Rat King does have the added benefit of if you and 6 people on your fire team are using the Rat King, you will get a nice buff from that in terms of damage and fire rate and overall. It used to be really strong back in the day. Nowadays, I mean, you're really not going to use it. Sidearm in PvE, not the best for ad clear. Can be a bit frustrating. You want something with like more medium range. That's why SMGs are really good, especially funnel web. Rat King, I'm actually going to put in the B tier. It actually has proper PvE applications. It's not like a PvP weapon like some of these weapons like Vigiwing. Vigiwing is like a PvP weapon. It has no place in PvE. Plus it requires everyone to use it. So if everyone's using Rat King, then no one's using like G-Horn and stuff. So it's probably being a little bit generous, but it could probably go in C, but overall, I'll just let it have the B tier rating for now. Mida Multi-Tool. This is again back in the topic of exotics. Some exotics are seemingly made for PvE or PvP, and rarely do some have great application in both. Mida is definitely a PvP exotic and really doesn't have any place in PvE, so we're going to give Mida the D tier treatment. And then we're moving on Crimson. So Crimson is the exotic hand cannon. I actually think it has a lot of good application this season, especially because of Unstoppable Hand Cannon and because of the health regen. This is actually a decently good exotic. Shreds through ads, so I'm going to give Crimson the A tier on this one. If you haven't been using the Crimson, definitely give it a try. It's not half bad. This has no place in PvE, especially with its exotic perk being like hitting body shots. Like, that's not what you're going to want to do with this weapon at all. Hard D in PvE. I have a soft spot for the Huckleberry. I really like it. You can infinitely fire it. You stack up those rampage stacks. I think that even in this season right now, Huckleberry is S tier. Someone might put it in between A and S, because would you really equip the Huckleberry over like a Wither Horde or an Izzy or a G-Horn? Probably not, but for what it's meant to do for ad clear, Huckleberry is amazing, and I think the Huckleberry deserves the S tier treatment. Suro's Auto Rifle. Initially you think, well, okay, PvP weapon, just throw it in D and move on, right? But there is a little bit of application with anti-barrier and the spinning up. Spinning up with this thing actually melt the shields pretty fast, pretty efficiently. So because of spinning up and anti-barrier, I think I'll put Suros in the C tier, but it's, it's down there for sure. We're not having any delusions of grandeur for the Suros. Cerberus. Now this thing is a really weird weapon. It's an auto rifle, but it shoots like 4 bullets. I used it a bunch in the raid today, and the feeling I got with it was that it wasn't that bad at ad clear, but it certainly wasn't like impressive. It was nothing like what we would talk about when we're talking about with the SMG we just had, which is the Huckleberry. I don't think it's anywhere near anything like that. Cerberus wasn't the worst ever. I'm gonna put Cerberus in the B tier because again, you're using your exotic for that, and it didn't seem like it was the best for ad clear, but maybe give it a try. Wishender. This thing is bad. The draw time is bad. Like almost any legendary bow is better than Wishender in PvE. You don't need wall hacks in PvE. I can't think of really many situations where you would want that or need that, so Wishender is getting the D. Next up is the Malfeasance. We got the exotic hand cannon, 180 RPM. It's not bad when you're using it against Taken, and that RPM of hand cannon is like the most conducive to PvE, and it's, you know, the way it functions and clears taken ads is actually pretty efficient. So we're gonna give Malfeasance the B ranking. Overall, it could be between B and A though. Now the Ace of Spades has Memento Mori and Firefly, which for ad clear for using a primary weapon is not bad. And all of these exotic primaries, just as a heads up, have just given that big recent 40% buff. Most of you already know this, but just to clarify, the Ace of Spades literally does 40% more damage to red bar enemies in PvE now. And you might think to yourself, there's no way you're gonna go into PvE with an Ace of Spades, but with Memento Mori and with Firefly proccing, this is actually not a half bad ad clear weapon, and you've got Unstoppable Hand Cannon. So if you haven't used Ace in PvE, it's actually surprisingly good, and I'm actually gonna give Ace the A tier treatment in this ranking for PvE, which might surprise a few of you. Now, the Chaperone is a slug shotgun, and if you do get Roadworn procced, the actual DPS potential from that is like really strong. You can melt champions with this. You could even do boss damage if you had the timing right. Chaperone is actually nothing to laugh at. I'm also gonna give Chaperone the A Izanagi's Burden. There's really not much to say about this other than just the top 5 exotic in the game, so strong. Of course, if you miss the shot, it's very punishing, which is why if you're rocking an Izzy, usually you have someone with a div on your team to make sure you hit those shots. But Izanagi's Burden is a must-have exotic in Destiny 2. Some of you out there, whether you have it or not, make sure you get it. Make sure you get the Callus with it. Definitely one of the best exotics. You can easily melt champions with this. All kinds of crazy things with Izanagi's Burden. The last word is a weapon you do not really want to use in PvE. However, there is an exotic that you can pair with it called Lucky Pants. And if you put Lucky Pants on and use the last word, the damage output from it is respectable, but that's really niche. And then plus you have your Hunter rocking Lucky Pants instead of like Star Eaters or Orpheus. So that's really not like the best strat, but it's not half bad for that. Last word overall, I mean, it definitely should be in like the C tier rating at best. But again, if you are using Lucky Pants, it could be like B. So next up, we'll talk about the Arbalist. This thing does anti-barrier now. This thing is S+ tier because of its ability to break all shield types. Whenever you're in PvE, whenever there's anti-barrier, having someone on your team with Arbalist will make that encounter 10 times easier. It's so nice to have an Arbalist on your team. Arbalist is the one I've mentioned so far, and Izanagi's Burden are both like S+ tier weapons that you like must-haves if you're doing PvE right now. Thorn is it's actually not the worst weapon for PvE. There's a lot of exotic hand cannons that could be worse. The way it procs with damage boost perk that also reloads the weapon, gives you free bullets, is actually not that bad. You don't really see people rocking a Thorn in PvE too often though. Overall, it should probably get the B tier treatment. I sort of like the way it works, and I think that it could have potential to have A for ad clear in certain situations. Outbreak perfected. This thing with the Siva nanites is so strong, easily one of the best exotics. I'm gonna put it in the S tier. It's not quite in the S+ tier, but you can just do like everything with it. So if you have a fire team filled with a bunch of Outbreak Perfecteds, you can just melt anything. You can literally melt the entire Caretaker encounter with just 6 Outbreak Perfected. It's like easy too, like it's not even that hard. Definitely a must-have exotic, but not quite up to, I wouldn't quite put it at the S+ tier level of where we're putting like that Izzy there, and then also Arbalist is S+ tier. Bad Juju, exotic pulse rifle, string of curses, super energy from this weapon. They also gave pulse rifles a plus 10% buff to ad clear along with the exotic, so pulse rifles get a huge like double buff this season. Bad Juju's not bad. It's good Juju. It's good Juju this season, and definitely worth using from time to time. But because of the way supers function right now, there's not really a time where I'm like, yeah, for sure slap on the Bad Juju. So can't put Bad Juju in like S tier. It's probably in between A and B, but it's definitely not a bad weapon. You might actually like it. Next up, we'll talk about the Lumina. This thing is actually surprisingly good. You don't see a whole lot of people using it. You do buff your teammates with those shots. They travel, give them a damage buff. You can use Unstoppable Hand Cannon this season. Decent with ad clear. Certainly not the best weapon. Of course, you know, SMG is kind of the go-to for ad clear overall, and cannons seem to be a little more sluggish with ad clear. Overall, I'm going to give the Lumina somewhere between B and A. I think I'll probably choose to put the Lumina in B for now. We've got the Monte Carlo. I remember using this thing all the way back in D1. So many years we've had the Monte Carlo now. It's as an alright, you know, it's got the damage boosting perk, gives you your melee energy. It's not a bad exotic overall. Anti-barrier this season. I'm going to put Monte Carlo probably in the B category. I can't imagine anyone really choosing this as their exotic because it's not like better than anything else, but we'll put Monte Carlo in B. Now the Bastion, quote unquote fusion, because it doesn't really function like a fusion. It does crazy damage and it has Unstoppable. It's actually pretty good, but it's not like S tier good, not anywhere close to that. I'm gonna put Bastion in A, but it is between like A and B probably. One of my favorite exotics to use for Unstoppable, just because I think it's funny that it has it on there, but definitely not the most efficient Unstoppable exotic, and definitely not the most efficient at melting champions, or for sure not bosses, but it's not bad. It's not bad damage from the Bastion. It'll surprise you if you use it. The Wither Horde is another one of these S+ tier exotics, truly like crazy good for ad clear with the catalyst. It has auto loading. It's just so good. I love using the Witherhoard all the time. I'm sure most of you already use this thing regularly in PvE, whether you're doing strikes, whether you're doing grandmasters, whether you're doing raids, dungeons, doesn't matter. Witherhoard is always a good option, always a viable option. S+ tier for Witherhoard. The Traveler's Chosen. Again, we've got sidearms, we've got bad range, no crazy like damage boosting perks. We have crazy ability energy from using it, which is actually pretty sick. Doesn't make up for the lack of range and ad clear potential. So it's like there's not really any reason to use Traveler's Chosen at all unless you're just beating a bounty that says like get grenade kills, and so you're trying to get your grenade back really fast. But even then you just rock Devour, right? So maybe if you just try to get your melee back, so you could rock Traveler's Chosen or you could rock the Monte Carlo. That's like the only time I ever think about using this weapon. So I'm gonna put Traveler's Chosen in the C tier. And then next up we have the No Time to Explain. It has a little bit of potential with the little seekers that it gets, but overall you're not choosing to put this on for your unstoppable pulse. No Time to Explain is gonna get the C tier. That's not the worst overall. I mean, getting that little seeker to do extra damage for you is decent, and we do have unstoppable pulse, so we'll put it in C tier. We're gonna rank the Hawk Moon now. Mostly a PvP weapon, but it does stack up those charges, and when it does, it actually does pretty decent damage. So Hawk Moon can be pretty lethal in PvE. We've stacked up those charges before and done some pretty crazy damage. So we're gonna put Hawk Moon in the B tier for this ranking. Choosing to use your exotic slot on Hawk Moon is pretty rare, and especially with those crazy exotics that just do so much better ad clear and so much better damage output, like the ones we previously mentioned. The DMT is respectable, especially we got Vorpal on it. It buffs itself by getting headshots. It just got a recent nerf to its RPM, but that doesn't affect PvE that much. Certainly not like the craziest weapon, and there is anti-barrier scout this season, so that's actually not bad. We'll put DMT actually in the A tier because it's surprisingly good inside PvE. Cryosthesia, again, as soon as we get on the topic of sidearm, we're going like B tier or lower, because sidearms in PvE are just not it, you know? The range isn't there, so they're not as much fun. B tier does have some cool potential with some stasis builds and stuff. I mean, freezing people and such like that, but overall it's just it's a B tier exotic. The Agar Scepter, really good. There's some crazy stasis builds you can make with it, but right now we're in the Void 3.0 season, so overall you're probably not going to see too many people rocking this, but Agar Scepter definitely is a beast and belongs in the A tier this season after the Void 3.0 insanity. We'll see what happens. If things are still the same, maybe Agar Scepter would go up in the rankings up to S tier, because there's some really fun builds with stasis with Agar Scepter. Oh man, this thing. So first off, we're talking about sidearms again, but this one has a different dynamic. It's a sidearm that has special ammo, so it has limited ammo, and it does have a good amount of range, but it's definitely having a lack of ammo is not it. So Forerunner we're going to put all the way in the D tier category. Not rocking this thing in PvE. This thing is a PvP weapon. And then the last kinetic slot exotic is going to be Osteostriga, which just came out recently. This thing is S tier. I'm not going to put it quite in S+ tier, although with certain builds it kind of is S+ tier, but in and of itself it's an S tier weapon. The ad clear potential is amazing, so good. Poison spreading to everyone is really awesome. I think that a lot of people will actually use this in Grandmasters this season. I think that there's potential. Now we'll move on to the energy slot. Starting off first, we got the Cold Heart. Feels like this thing has been used in forever. We're gonna put it all the way down in the D tier for the Cold Heart. Its perks don't really buff it the same. There's so many other trace rifles that just outclass it, like Prometheus Lens, like actually do like really good ad clear potential and stuff, and also Agar Scepter like we talked about as well. So Cold Heart gets the D tier treatment. Maybe I could put it in C because it's not the worst ever, but honestly it belongs down there. Next we'll talk about the Fighting Lion. You got infinite ammo now, and I guess technically it would do like more damage because it gets the primary buff. So Fighting Lion, not the worst exotic ever. We'll put it in the B tier category for this season, and we'll move on to the next one. We got the Sunshot. I actually used the Sunshot a bunch today. Overall, it's probably not the worst option for an exotic. Again, you have to compete against those other ones, so we're gonna put Sunshot in the A category. Graviton Lance is a tough one to rank because with Void 3.0 it has a lot of potential. We have the ability to clear ads crazily, volatile rounds, do all this stuff. It's very hard to give this an S tier rating, but it is really good. So I'm gonna put Graviton Lance in the A tier, but it's in between A and S, I think. So now Skyburner's Oath. Oh man, this thing is so bad. When are we getting a buff for Skyburner's Oath? There's like one instance where you use this in the Proving Grounds, but that's like when you glitch out of the map or something, I think. Overall, you just don't use this exotic. Don't use this scout ever. You put this thing on, you're throwing big time. And I think that Risk Runner is going to be a problem during Arc 3.0. Risk Runner might literally break the Arc 3.0 sandbox because of how strong it is now. And with Arc 3.0, I can only imagine it's just going to be absolutely busted. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what Bungie does to adjust that. Or maybe Bungie wants Risk Runner to be the featured focus, but we'll see. Risk Runner is definitely S tier though. Hard Light has the ability to swap between 3 different, you know, affinities. You got the Solar, the Arc, the Void. It's not too bad. Doesn't have the best ad clear potential. It doesn't really do the best job overall at any one given thing, but the ability to change shields isn't too bad. So probably put Hard Light in between B and C. Maybe rest Hard Light in the C tier for now. We'll let it sit down there. Now this thing has had a moment where it was actually really good. As it stands right now, there's really not any encounters or instances where I can think you're like, this is your go-to exotic to put on. The way in which you want to use it is you'd want to use it to kill ads non-lethal, right? Like you want to shoot a boss where you just keep getting that faster charge time. But if you do kill it, it gives you like kill clip. I still don't think it's the best exotic, so I'll put it in the B tier. It's not bad though. Honestly, I like using Merciless, and sometimes we melt some bosses with it. It's respectably good, but certainly not like A tier or S tier exotic for melting bosses. So it's kind of just in a weird spot where it's like a special ammo weapon. It's meant to melt bosses, but doesn't really do that very well. That makes sense. Borealis, wow, definitely needs to needs a relook. We're gonna put the Borealis all the way down in the D tier. I can't think of any reason why you'd use this over just using an energy sniper that has that respective affinity. I mean, I guess you have the ability to swap around a little bit, but I've never once thought like, yeah, we for sure should put on the Borealis for this, no matter what. So Borealis gets the D tier treatment. I can't even think of an instance where you'd want to use this over any other sniper. Prometheus Lens is actually pretty sick if you haven't used this thing. Not that conducive to Void 3.0, but it's not bad for what it does and what you're trying to do with it. So we'll put the Prometheus Lens in the B tier ranking. Oh, this thing has broke the game so many times. Somewhat conducive to Void 3.0, right? You think like, oh, it's Void 3.0 season, so Void, Telesto's Void should be amazing, right? It is, but it's also like, why wouldn't you just use a Void primary ammo? Like, for example, Funnel Web, Gnawing Hunger, Reckless Oracle, or anything that's just a primary ammo weapon. It tends to proc the volatile rounds a little bit better. So Telesto, unfortunately, doesn't actually fit with Void 3.0 as good as the primary ammo Void weapons. So fortunately, Telesto I'm going to put in the A tier. It's not bad at what it does, though. It actually does decent damage to champions and high-level enemies. So Telesto does get the A tier treatment, but unfortunately, even with Void 3.0, it's not an S tier weapon, in my opinion. Polaris Lance. This thing is, man, I feel like this is a relic of the past. I haven't seen anyone using this in so long. It isn't a half bad exotic overall. If you're in an encounter where you have a ton of range, really, it's not like the go-to in anything. And it doesn't even do like ad clear better than anything. So we'll just put the Polaris Lance in like the B ranking. If you do have the right distance, it's not too bad. You're hitting those headshots. At least it is conducive to what you're trying to do with the weapon. And then we'll talk about the Trinity Ghoul. The Trinity Ghoul exotic bow is S tier. So I'm not going to put it in the crazy S plus tier like we talked about some of those others, but Trinity Ghoul is for sure S tier. This thing is amazing at ad clear. I love using this. We all thought it would be really good. It is really good. It's the Void 3.0 season. You're not going to see people using the Trinity Ghoul as much because Void 3.0. If you want to use something non-Void 3.0, if you get tired of it, Trinity Ghoul is amazing for ad clear. And definitely an S tier weapon, especially because of that 40% buff. Wave Splitter Trace Rifle. It has some serious potential. It does an okay job at what it's meant to do, but it's certainly not like the meta by any means. We're not going to put it in the S tier category. Not close to that. Probably more like A tier for the Wave Splitter. Is Void and is pretty good. Lord of Wolves. All right, my favorite exotic for PvP, but this doesn't really have much application in PvE. Every time I try to use it in PvE, I run out of ammo and don't really seem to clear the ads very well. So we're going to give Lord of Wolves the D tier ranking and say that that belongs in the PvP realm. Just leave it in PvP. And along with the next one as well, we got the Jotun.
Jotun.
It has a crazy slow charge time. Damage output isn't the worst ever, but to match that charge time, it's just not very conducive in PvE. Jotun gets the D tier ranking. And then we'll talk about the Le Monarch bow. This thing is such a beast, man. Let's just throw this thing in the S tier ranking right off the bat because we know this Le Monarch is so good. Really good exotic bow. Always a good option in PvE. Le Monarch is a beast. Harba, I was using this earlier, and this thing freaking shreds. This thing is absolutely amazing ad clear. It actually can melt majors pretty well also when you have the perk proc. So Tarba honestly does belong in the A tier, and a lot of people might disagree and be like, what? There's no way you'd use Tarba, but it's actually not bad in PvE. So definitely try it out if you haven't. Ariana's Vow. Now, this is what I was talking about. The Ariana's Vow was S tier because it was like the exotic special that could like one-shot barriers, and it was so good in like Grandmasters or endgame content. S tier before. But now that Arbalist exists, and this is the way things work now, when one exotic overshadows another exotic, it literally pushes it down rankings. Probably in the B tier. And that might seem pretty harsh, and nothing has been nerfed about it, but Arbalist is just the option. Arbalist is the way. If you're trying to mess with barriers and you're using an exotic, you're not using Ariana. Like there's just, I can't think of a build, any reason where you'd be like, yeah, for sure, just put the Ariana on over the Arbalist for the barriers. Even if there was like Solar Singe, you just use like Arbalist and then use a solar energy weapon, right? use a summoner or something. It's just not the option. So we're gonna put Ariana all the way in the B tier because Arbalist. The reason why Arbalist is S+ tier, it literally pushes any other anti-barrier weapon down the rankings, multiple rankings. The Divinity Trace Rifle, make sure to send a thank you message to the div person on your raid fire team, because they take a burden that not everyone wants. And if you're actually badass, by the way, if you want to be not the div, but you can do like div swapping where you can shoot the div and then swap to your rocket. I've never done this. I'm not like an expert at this by any means, but people out there literally do like amazing DPS with the div and keeping the div bubble up. So if you want to be a badass, use the div and actually use it the right way, where you swap off and then you can be the div and then literally do more DPS than the people who are meant to be the DPS people and then laugh at them. So, and the div goes in the S tier ranking because it's just so good. I mean, this is just, you got to use this. Overload, Sun's Overload makes the crit huge, helping everyone hit their crits. The div is the way. Now, this thing, it actually gets its damage boosting perk from just hitting headshots, which is kind of like Focus Fury with the new recent perk we've gotten. And then along with that, it does get a buff to damage. It has those crazy tracking projectiles. There is anti-barrier scout. The symmetry is not half bad this season. I took it for a spin for a little bit and was like, not bad. Like, it wasn't the worst, but it's certainly far from the best. Probably belongs somewhere in between B and C, but I will put it in B this season with the anti-barrier scout. If you haven't given symmetry a try, if you want to try something really, really way out there, something that no one ever really sees, I guess you could try to throw that on, but you might get booted from your LFG team, so keep that in mind. Devil's Ruin, exotic, primary, sidearm. So we already get the knockdown from being a sidearm, and we said if it's a sidearm and it's an exotic, it's getting the B tier or lower treatment. The one exception to that is Devil's Ruin. Devil's Ruin is actually pretty sick because it has infinite ammo and the laser is like unstoppable. It's not bad. Devil's Ruin gets the A tier treatment, nowhere near S, but Devil's Ruin is actually respectably good. If there were sidearm mods and stuff, it actually could be really good because it could stun 2 different types of champions, which is pretty rare. I think the Devil's Ruin is really good exotic because of that laser that it shoots, and we're gonna give it A ranking. Before we went out for the homie, Cloud Strike got the harsh nerf where it was doing crazy damage with the div bubble. Bungie fixed that, quote unquote fixed it, I guess. And now Cloud Strike is a B tier exotic at best. So Cloud Strike was S way back in the day, but not anymore. Tommy's Matchbook, we've got an exotic, solar, 720 RPM, auto rifle. We've got, of course, anti-barrier this season's not bad. Actually, what is it? It's Overload this season. Overload auto rifle this season, my bad. Its perk overall with Devour would actually synergize pretty well with Void 3.0 builds. However, you're not shooting a Void weapon. So it's kind of like you could continuously get your health back with Tommy's Matchbook. So that would negate the damage that it does to you. But you're not using a void weapon, so you're not making like the volatile rounds. So it's like, it's not the best overall, but it's not the worst. So I'm going to give Tommy's Matchbook a B tier ranking. We've got the Arc, Exotic Shotgun, Fourth Horseman. This thing used to be a beast, and its actual burst DPS potential is amazing if you only have just a very short, limited window of time to damage. But overall, I can't really think of any instances where you're using the Fourth Horseman. And other than that, just like instant burst DPS, it's just not that good. You're not really using this for much else. So we're going to give Fourth Horseman the C ranking, unfortunately. So sad for Fourth Horseman. Next up, we'll be talking about the Ruinous Effigy Trace Rifle. You can kill an enemy with it, drops a little orb. You can slam the orb. It's actually not bad of an exotic, and it's actually a lot of fun to use. Its fun factor is S tier, but its actual use in PvE is probably closer to B tier, so that's the ranking I'll be giving it. B tier for Ruinous Effigy. We'll talk about the duality. You've got a slug shotgun and a pellet shotgun. Obviously, we'll be using the slug feature of this for PvE because slugs are a lot stronger. Even with that slug potential, the duality is getting the C ranking because there's just a lot better slugs in the game, and you wouldn't have to use your exotic slot on them as well, so keep that in mind. We got to talk about the Tiku's Divination. This thing is just a beast. S tier on this. Moving on. Now the Vex has gotten a bunch of nerfs and buffs and changes to it, and overall it's not like the worst exotic ever, but it's certainly not like crazy ad clear that you want it to be. So all the way down in the C tier because I don't think that it has much conduciveness to this season, and there's nothing I can think of you'd want to use the Vex for in PvE for this season, so which is big sad because it was S or A back in the day. Now the Lawrence Driver, if you actually get kills with it, actually has good ad clear potential and actually does like power ammo damage. The Lawrence is actually really, really strong and definitely worth using from time to time. I'm going to put Lawrence Driver in the A tier ranking. And then we'll talk about the Glaives next. Edge of Concurrence, we're going to give the D tier treatment. The Edge of Action, we've got the B tier, and the Edge of Intent is the C tier. The Hunter Glaive is just so bad. The Hunter exotic glaive is like, I don't even know why that is a thing. The Titan one has some utility, okay? The Titan one has some potential that it can, you know, can make a little lava cake bubble, and maybe that could save you from, I don't know, getting shot by a boss or in some situations. So I'll give that one a B ranking, which is pretty high for the exotic glaive. A lot of people might disagree with that. And the Warlock one's actually not bad either, with a little bit of the healing from that. So the Dead Messenger exotic grenade launcher, this thing is S tier. This thing's add clear potential. Get the Dead Messenger, use the Dead Messenger. It's amazing. Dead Messenger, definitely worth grabbing this season. And then we'll be talking about the exotic pulse rifle that you get from the raid, the collective obligation, something that I got on my very first clear. And I thought it was pretty crazy at first, and it is really good if you're in a fire team of 6 people using Void 3.0 builds. Debuffs, it'll apply volatile rounds, it will apply suppression effect as well. It has some serious potential with a team of 6, but overall it's really not the best. It's got to be somewhere between B, maybe A tier, but that's stretching it. But overall it's probably closer to B outside of Void 3.0 season, so definitely has potential this season while it's Void 3.0. Now we've gone through all of the exotic primaries, we've gone through all of the exotic energies. Now it's time for the exotic power weapons to be ranked. Okay, Prospector exotic grenade launcher. If you're trying to use an exotic in the power slot and you choose the Prospector, you have some really interesting ideas. I'm not sure what you're doing, but it's not the worst damage overall, but it's just far from the best. So we're gonna put Prospector in the C ranking. It's not D, like it's not like the worst option ever, but there's much better options. Tractor this season isn't, I can't think of too many instances where I'm like super stoked or feel like I need to bust out the Tractor, but it is really good at what it does. It has previously been S tier from time to time. I'm gonna put Tractor in A tier this season, but it's somewhere between A and S. Obviously the ability to debuff things is really good, but you can get that from a variety of other sources and other things that are just more efficient than Tractor, and you don't have to sacrifice your exotic to do so. So we're gonna put Tractor in A tier. This thing's handling and reload is just painful. I can't think of any instances where you use this. We're gonna put Acris in the D tier. I think its overall damage output really isn't that good anyways. Acris gets the D tier treatment. Darcy, also nothing to squawk over. It sucks, a lot of these power weapons, they just have these other weapons that just overshadow them so much that you wouldn't really use them. So Darcy gets the C tier treatment. Wardcliff, I don't know what Bungie's doing with Wardcliff or why they hate Wardcliff. I think they have like a personal vendetta against the Wardcliff. It's just there's all these other rockets, they're so much better. Because the Galhorn exists, it's really hard to rank the Wardcliff very high. It just doesn't do anything near like what Galhorn does, and it's definitely rough busting out the Wardcliff. It was doing like bug damage for a little bit, and that was actually kind of sick, but overall Wardcliff is not it in PvE. I'm telling you, you might disagree, you might think Wardcliff is awesome, but I don't think so. I think Wardcliff is probably, I'll give it the C ranking, but it's definitely between C and D. And then next we'll talk about the Colony. I did actually use this a little bit today. Its ammo reserves are terrible, barely kills the ads anyways. Colony is just like D minus tier. Colony is like one of the worst exotics you could put on. RIP Worldline Skating, not the worst exotic ever. We'll maybe give it the C tier ranking for this one and move on to the next, which is Sleeper. Sleeper is really good. Sleeper gets the S tier treatment. Its damage output's amazing. If you're hitting those crits, especially if you got someone rocking div to make it really easy to hit those crits, the damage is awesome. It's not an S plus tier. It's not like a must have necessarily, but it is really good, and Sleeper is respectable. Sleeper gets the S tier ranking. The next one is Whisper. Whisper actually got a few different buffs and is respectably good. It's somewhere between A and S, but I don't think it's S, so I'm going to give Whisper the A tier ranking. 1000 Voices, again, we'll give it very similar ranking to Whisper. 1000 Voices, very good, but there's not an instance in PvE right now where you're looking to use this necessarily. It was amazing last season, Fusion Rifle season, and all those Fusion Rifle mods, but now we'll give the 1000 Voices the A tier rating, because it's not bad. I mean, it does melt some stuff in the game. I don't know what to think about the two-tailed fox. It's like a rocket. It's not very good. It's not the worst, but it is an exotic rocket. It does shoot 2 rockets. G-Horn exists, which definitely outclasses this thing. Probably have to put two-tail also in the C ranking with Wardcliff as well, because the Galhorn exists, and the Galhorn is just insane. And we'll get to the Galhorn in just a moment and talk about that. Next up, we've got the Black Talon. This thing doesn't work very well. The blocking drains your guard, so the recent changes to this actually kind of mess with it. So Black Talon, unfortunately, C tier exotic at best. The Queenbreaker is some of the worst damage you could use on a linear fusion. There's so many better options for linear fusion. Don't ever equip the Queenbreaker in PvE. Please, just don't do it. D tier, D minus tier for the Queenbreaker. Thunderlord's not bad for ad clear. I don't know why you'd really equip exotic power weapon for ad clear. You're gonna not have as much ammo, but if you really had to like clear through some ads fast, like the second to last encounter in the raid, if you're trying to clear some ads, Thunderlord would actually not be a bad option, you know, but I'm gonna put it in B overall because there's definitely better options out there, and you know, using your exotic for ad clear on your power weapon is kind of like, it's just not the best option, or not, it's a little bit counterintuitive most of the time. Anarchy is still really good. We're gonna give Anarchy the A ranking. It of course was S tier for the longest time. You can still use it, you know, you just shoot it at boss and it just does, you know, damage over time, and you can start to do damage with other weapons. So Anarchy is actually still respectably good. And we'll talk about the Truth exotic rocket. This is funny, obviously. The Truth has no place inside PvE. I can't even, have you ever gone into a raid and had someone pull out the Truth rocket? Like, what? That doesn't even make sense. Like, I can't even visually see what that would look like, someone shooting a Truth rocket. Don't use the Truth in PvE. It's a D tier, D minus tier in PvE. Oh, I moved this over. No, I didn't want to move this over. Deathbringer. All right, now this thing, unfortunately, when you use 6 of them, the projectiles blow each other up, and so it's not very good with a fire team. But if you actually look at the overall damage of this weapon in and of itself, it's insane. It's very, very good. If you use it properly with the catalyst, Deathbringer is an S tier exotic. But unfortunately, if you put on 6 of them and then try to melt a boss, you just do like 10% of the damage you're supposed to. So it's very hard to rank it. I am going to give Deathbringer the S tier rating in and of itself, but I really hope that Bungie fixes that problem where the projectiles explode each other, because it's big sad, because Deathbringer could be amazing. This thing is was really good. Got nerfed pretty hard. Now we'll have to put it all the way down in the C tier ranking, unfortunately. Leviathan's Breath. Now, again, we're going to give this the C tier rating overall, because I can't really think of any instances where you're trying to use this. Its damage output isn't half bad overall in terms of how much each arrow does, but overall, you know, there's just so many better options. So Leviathan's Breath gets the C tier ranking. And the Heir Apparent does have the little overshield, but it got nerfed pretty hard. It doesn't have extremely good damage. It has decent ad clear potential, but really, there's no instance where you're trying to use the Heir Apparent. D tier ranking for the Heir Apparent. And we have the Eyes of Tomorrow, which the Eyes of Tomorrow is, for whatever reason, Bungie just doesn't want it to be good, so it is a C tier ranking for an exotic rocket. The Lament has been fixed recently and is actually really good. Lament will put in A tier right now, definitely respectable. And Gjallarhorn. Now this is another S plus tier weapon. I don't know what Bungie was thinking when they brought this back. They've made it just absolutely nuts. Damage from it, solar, the projectiles, the Wolfpack rounds are actually arc, if you didn't know that, and they actually do properly break arc shields, so it's really, really good. So it almost has like essentially the two-tailed fox effect, but it arc and solar. G-Horn is S plus tier, always good for ad clear, always good for boss damage if necessary, and if you don't have everyone using it, you can at least have one person using it, which literally gives Wolfpack rounds to all the other legendary rocket users. It's so good. G-Horn is S plus tier. And next up we'll talk about the Parasite. This thing is super good for damage. That first shot when you have that times 20 stack is just nuts. One of my favorite weapons to use this season because it's new and it's actually really good. It gets the S tier treatment. I'm not going to put it in the crazy S plus like the other ones, but it's definitely S tier and definitely worth using. And then we have the Grand Overture, which doesn't really have much application in PvE. We'll give it the B tier ranking overall because it's not the worst thing ever, but it's definitely not the best exotic in PvE. There you have it. That is every single exotic inside Destiny 2. Hopefully you all enjoyed. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of the exotics that I ranked in this video, and make sure to subscribe with notifications on if you did enjoy. Smash the like button. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Later.